And I'd like to thank you all for joining us for our 2016 Q1 Town Hall. Just a little history. We started this Town Hall in Q1 of last year, mainly to give the industry a central place for leaders to discuss the changes we're seeing in the market, ways to increase overall productivity, market awareness, hopefully resulting in more sales and profits. As always, a survey will be emailed following this meeting. If you find value in this event and specifically in this topic, please provide the feedback. We use this feedback as we determine where we're going to go next. Today, you're going to hear from me and a little bit of overall a recap of what happened at UserCon, some of the things that you shared with us, and what we intend to do in 2017 moving forward. Most of you know our other speaker, our CEO and President, Mr. John Button. Today he's going to talk about loan volume. It's the big challenge we all face. John's going to take some of the concepts that we introduced from our user conference, along with the work done since that conference, and provide ideas that we hope will help drive more loan volume. At the end of this presentation, you definitely will have the opportunity to ask questions, and we please encourage you to do so. While we're on that note, a little housekeeping. If you have a question along the way, please type it into the GoToWebinar question panel, and we will try to address it as time permits during the presentation. Clicking the blue button on your panel, it will make sure that you're seeing the presentation in the full screen. And if you click that orange arrow, you will make sure the panel gets out of your way. So the secret of change, to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. So 2015, hello change, brought us the most significant change to our industry. A change that, from a technology perspective, affected our core product, RVX, immensely. We also realized it was going to affect the way the market needed to sell the product. Change has to happen for our industry to grow. Whether it's new sales tools from us or new selling techniques, we all have to change. Our user conference was born of the idea of let's build the new. A place where we can get together and discuss ideas. Obviously, new sales tools, the technology would be a strong point for us, but we also wanted to bring new ideas, actionable ideas to the forefront. To do this, we designed a combination of sessions and distinct tracks for loan officers, operations, and executives. So how did we do with it all? Well, by the numbers, we had 160 total attendees. We had 10 of our partners paid sponsors. And the nice thing we had that we're very proud of is we had 67 different companies that attended, and we'd like to thank all of you on this call for that as well. We had a mix of both lenders and brokers. We had academics, financial planners, NERMLA was present, we had legal. And by the numbers, LOs made up about 2 to 1 of the attendees. We're very grateful that your feedback was positive. And we see this as a good first step, but that's not where we're going to stay. Now we want to take the feedback and bring new tools to help facilitate more loan volume through 2016 and into 2017. Of all the survey questions that we asked, one of the most interesting ones to me was, if you had the opportunity to attend in 2017, would you bring someone? 30% of you actually said, yeah, you're going to attend, but not only are you going to attend, you're going to bring 7 or more people. So we're definitely looking at different venues for 2017. So here's what I can share with you coming forward. It's going to be in February, not January of 2017. The weather on the East Coast made that decision a little bit easier. We will still do it in San Diego, and we plan to open registration in July. Some more feedback was more interactive product sessions. So we're going to bring that to you. More networking. We're going to do that as well. We're going to talk more about wholesale. And as always, you thought the food was great at this one. It's going to be even better next time. So tell us what you want. We've set up an email address, usercon@reversevision.com. You have ideas or something you want, please do send that to us. So on that note, I'm very pleased to introduce to you our CEO and President, Mr. John Button, who is going to take, like I said, what we started with at UserCon and take it to the next level. Mr. John Button.
Thank you, Wendy. Glad to be with everyone today. I very much appreciate you taking a few minutes to share with me, and hopefully I can bring you an idea too that might be useful. Bear with me just one moment as we turn on the presentation side of this, and I'll be right with you.
All right.
Okay, so what I wanted to talk about today is just spend a few minutes on a topic we began to introduce at the user conference, and I think is as important as ever. Certainly the feedback we've got at that conference and the feedback we've received from a focus group since seems to indicate that we're on the right track with the notion here. And fundamentally, it's about financial selling. It's about how do we make the HECM loan product a compelling offering to retirees that are funded and maybe even well-funded. Certainly not folks that are in what you would classically call the needs-based category. This represents an opportunity shift going to people who are potentially well-funded retirees and not just folks that are in a last resort position. It's a shift that's somewhat necessitated by the changes in the HECM product, but even more so, what it really is about, I think, is to expand our focus more aggressively on the vast majority of seniors and retirees, not a small minority that are in a unique or a difficult situation. But the issues here are that this is largely a question you would think for financial planners, people doing retirement planning for folks. Unfortunately, by and large, they're not yet on board with the more complex use of HECMs in an overall portfolio. Certainly some are, and there's very clearly emergent ideas here, many of which you all are quite familiar with, papers written on this subject, and a lot of activity by leading academics in the financial planning world. But I still would suggest that a survey of the broad financial planning market indicates that the vast majority of planners are not yet on board offering their customers the notion of a reverse and how it can help them in their overall retirement plan. Likewise, our loan officers in the industry are not universally well armed for financial selling, for explaining to a borrower in detail how a retirement portfolio can be enhanced by the use of a HECM. So the solution, I think, involves a variety of steps. Certainly education for our own LOs, getting the broad base of LOs in the industry more familiar with the terminology and the techniques of modeling in a financial sense a retiree's needs and portfolio, at least to the degree necessary to show them how HECM can be beneficial. Simultaneously, creating financial planner relationships where we can be collectively more interactive with financial planners, both for loan officers who create interest with a borrower using financial sales techniques can refer them to a financial planner, and vice versa. Financial planners who increasingly embrace the use of a HECM have a natural pathway and a known relationship with a trusted loan officer that they could refer to when it comes time to execute on the plans they put in place. To accomplish those two things, we think it's also critically important to have financial modeling tools available to the loan officer so that they can not only understand the unique situation of a borrower, but have the necessary tools to be able to show, explain, and potentially be compelling with a borrower as to why a HECM would greatly enhance their retirement financial plan. Ultimately, therefore, the fourth point, being able to demonstrate how HECMs affect portfolio performance and how they can be used alongside of an investment portfolio or retirement plan portfolio to improve the overall result. So our efforts as a firm in this area come in a variety of flavors, but fundamentally, we're working to determine the best ways to explain these more complex financial concepts and to conversely understand the decision scenarios that borrowers face, the kinds of questions and situations that loan officers get into when they're dealing with these more complex financial questions. Ultimately, therefore, helping to develop both financial models and methods to explain those models to a borrower. The outcome of that effort is educational content and sales content, some of which we've already begun to build. As part of a pilot program, the next step from presentations on this general subject we made at the user conference, we have a group of pilot loan officers, and we've developed and given over to them a set of PowerPoints that begin to provide both educational content and sales content that they could use directly with borrowers. In addition to that, modeling tools. My view is that the modeling tool that already exists in the RV exchange world, the loan simulator, is probably the most underused feature in the entire product. When I go out and visit with folks, it's not uncommon to find out that they're either not familiar with it or possibly don't know that it exists. That kind of loan simulation capability, we think, is just the start. So another next step that we engaged in after the user conference was to build a prototype, much more sophisticated loan model, and we have subsequently shared that with a small group of pilot users to gather feedback as to whether or not we're on the right track. You'll see those capabilities, and I'll refer to them later on in our conversation today. So I just wanted to take one financial topic and explore it in just a bit more depth to give you a sense of both where I would suggest we need to go as an industry, but also to give you an idea of some of the content that we've delivered already. And that is to talk a bit more about a subject some of you are quite familiar with, and others maybe not so much, sequence of returns and how it affects a retirement portfolio and how a HECM, together with a retirement portfolio, can be a really attractive solution to dealing with the potential downside of sequence of returns. When we think about well-funded retirees, folks that have a retirement portfolio that maybe are in good position, no matter what position they may be in, there's always an opportunity to make it better. And in particular, folks have to worry about longevity or longevity risk. The potential that their life, which hopefully will be a long and enjoyable retirement, will potentially outstrip their ability to fund that retirement, that they will use up their retirement nest egg more rapidly than they expected, or their life being longer, that it would not extend to the extent that it was originally planned for. Similarly, they have to worry about protecting the retirement assets they have in place. Generally, those assets are going to be invested in some fashion. And like all investments, there's positive returns, but there's also negative return risk. The market over the last few months has certainly demonstrated that to us. There's been quite a bit of volatility in the market, a lot of ups and downs, and as we know, over time, with a retirement that's 10, 15, 20, 25, or 30 years long, that length of time exposes you to a lot of potential downside risk in what happens with your retirement nest egg. So what we want to be able to do is consider the three ways that someone could focus on to enhance their retirement position. First, their desires may be to withdraw more as they enjoy their retirement, to improve the quality of life or to achieve certain objectives they might have in their retirement plan. The second area that they might be worried about is what I just spoke about, longevity of their portfolio. There might be a significant issue that they face. They may have a nicely funded portfolio, but when they project out their needs over time, they have some worry of that portfolio lasting as long as their retirement is expected. And then, of course, estate net worth. Some folks have a great focus on a desire to have a legacy and something to hand down to their heirs, and have a particular focus on maximizing that. So let's look at the issue of sequence of returns risk in just a bit more detail with a couple of illustrations. The first I want to take you through here is a summary version of what we talked about at the user conference. So for those of you that were there, bear with me a moment, and I'll walk through this very briefly, and then we'll go on to a more sophisticated version as well that was not spoken about there. So I just want to use an example to illustrate a point. We're going to use a nice round number like $1 million investment portfolio or retirement portfolio. And using a typical 4% of the starting portfolio value, we're going to assume that this particular retiree wants to withdraw $40,000 annually from their $1 million portfolio over the retirement period. But now what we're going to look at is the notion that the order in which returns in a marketplace happen matters. So we're going to compare two scenarios. Both of these scenarios have a 5% average return rate. So if one were to ask for either of these scenarios, gee, what was your average return on your investment? The answer would be 5%. There's no difference. But in fact, there's a very big difference. The first scenario we'll look at is we'll get some bad returns for a few years and then good returns. Then we'll contrast that with the scenario of good returns and then go into bad returns. So specifically, here's a 20-year view. It's a very simplistic take on what returns on this investment portfolio or retirement portfolio might look like. So in the first 5 years of the blue column, the bad to good, we're going to start out with 5 years of bad returns, 5% losses for 5 years in a row. But that's okay because we're going to make up for it with 15 years of 8% returns all the way through the 20-year period. The orange-colored column is the good to bad scenario, 15 years of 8% returns followed by 5 years with the negative 5% return. Again, the average return is the same in these two portfolios. So starting with this $1 million portfolio, withdrawing $40,000 each year, the blue line represents the bad to good. We started $1 million, and you can see that it trends down as the bad returns happen. But then in the 6th year, it starts to grow again because of the positive returns in the marketplace. But ultimately, we see that the portfolio ends up somewhere around $750,000. It loses about $250,000 over these 20 years. Not awful, but maybe less than you might desire. Let's look at the orange column. That's what the portfolio value looks like. Starts at $1 million, grows while the returns are good, loses pretty sharply when the returns are bad, but ultimately ends up at about $1.5 million. So as you can see, the ending point after 20 years is quite dramatically different between these two portfolios. So you can imagine the effects in the marketplace. You have a fundamentally different behavior of how much you can take out of the portfolio, what its final value is, its potential life, depending upon the order in which returns happen. It's simply the order that matters, not the actual amount of the returns. So this is a bit of an artificial example just to illustrate the concept. Let's look at something that's more representative of maybe real life, or at least historic life. So we're going to look at two different approaches. We're going to look at our friend Silly Sally and our other friend Brilliant Betty. Both of them are going to retire some 20 years ago in the past, and we're going to see what happened to them. They each started with a $300,000 portfolio. Silly Sally decided to not enter into a HECM or a reverse loan. Silly Sally decided that she'd live exclusively off of this $300,000 retirement portfolio. So using fairly typical guidance of 4% of the starting portfolio value, she decided to withdraw $12,000 annually for her living expenses over her retirement period. Brilliant Betty, on the other hand, went to their friendly neighborhood loan officer that has the ability to issue a HECM, and got a HECM early in her retirement. And she got it right at the very beginning, 20-some years ago, as a line of credit, and decided to use that line of credit to draw on only when a negative return year happened. So anytime there was a negative return in her retirement portfolio, in the following year, after the negative return happened, instead of withdrawing from her portfolio, she took her necessary income needs from the line of credit. So every time it was after a bear market, again, you don't know that you're going to have negative returns. If you knew in advance that you did, you would avoid them. But unfortunately, you generally don't know. So the way that that Betty behaved is when a year was bad, had negative returns, the very next year, she took her money from the line of credit. If the year was good with positive returns, she did not. So let's look back at time and see how these two portfolios and behaviors played out. Just for simplicity, we'll use the Standard & Poor's 500, a broad stock index, as an indicator of the returns on the portfolio, respectively, of either Sally or Betty. But specifically, if we look at that, if we start from this last year and go back 20 years, the blue bars here represent the percent return on the S&P 500 in that year. So as you can see, over the past 20 years, there were some pretty nice years with better than 30% returns in the market, but there were also 4 years of negative returns. And we'll all remember the really drastic negative returns of 2008, with nearly 40% loss of value in the S&P 500. So now, let's apply these return rates over those 20 years to each of the scenarios I outlined a minute ago. Silly Sally's approach and Brilliant Betty's approach. So here are the years in the left-hand column, and then the numbers I just showed you a moment ago in bar chart form, the S&P 500 return for the year in each of the 20 years, and then Sally's portfolio. Now, Sally's portfolio started at $300,000. Remember, Sally and Betty each are taking $12,000 every year as their income source. But the portfolio, in addition to that withdrawal, is also either growing or shrinking based upon the returns of the S&P 500 in that year. So in Sally's portfolio column, you can see the value of her portfolio as we proceed through those 20 years. And the very bottom of the 20th year, last year, 2015, Sally's portfolio ends up with $888,000 in value. Brilliant Betty, on the other hand, does essentially the same thing, except for, as you can see, starting in 2001, as a result of the negative returns in 2000, Brilliant Betty decided in 2001 to not withdraw $12,000 from her portfolio. She took it from a line of credit in her HECM instead. So you can see in the last column, Betty's withdrawals from her line of credit. And each of the 4 negative return years, the following year, Betty took the $12,000 from her line of credit. So you can see 4 simple withdrawals over 20 years, a grand total of $48,000 withdrawn from her line of credit. The net result, when all is said and done, after these 4 years where Sally withdrew from the line of credit as opposed to from her portfolio, is $120,000 relative to Betty. Sally's portfolio ends up being worth over $1 million. Betty's did not. That's a 13% increase. That's a pretty substantial improvement in your retirement situation with 4 simple withdrawals from the line of credit using real-life return rates over the past 20 years. So the first example I gave, a simple illustration of bad to good and good to bad, a little artificial, just to make the point. Here's a more real-life example with a fairly simplistic approach, but even that simple approach produces a fairly meaningful improvement in the overall retirement plan. And this is the sort of picture that a retiree should be considering, even if they have a well-funded portfolio. It could improve their outcome. In this particular case, We did nothing different about withdrawals, so the improvement came entirely in the size of the portfolio. So clearly that larger portfolio means either a better estate or more money available, meaning better longevity of the portfolio. It could last even longer. Now, those are nice reverse historically looking views. History is fabulous for examples. It's wonderful because you know the race and you know the sequence of events that occur. Unfortunately, the future is a tad bit harder to know, and it's a whole lot harder to show because you don't know what the future is going to be. You can use history to illustrate, but when you take somebody's actual portfolio and think about the future, while the concepts apply, the actual numbers don't. You really don't know what the future rates are going to be. So how do we model this? How do we look at that problem of dealing with the future in some objective, reasonable way? Well, the answer is we create many possible futures. And generally, this would be referred to as many interest rate paths or many interest rate cases. And then we take all of those cases and statistically put them back together, and we summarize what that effect is with probabilities. So instead of just looking at one case like I just did, the last 20 years of S&P returns, we look into the future and we say, well, what if interest rates do this? What if they do that? And we do 1,000 what ifs of what interest rates might be in the future. We subject the assumptions of somebody's portfolio, and hopefully they're HECM, to those assumptions of what the future might be, and then summarize with probabilities, the likelihood that one thing or another would happen. And in particular, what I think most retirees would find interesting is to compare and contrast with many different paths of the future what the likelihood of their retirement portfolio surviving is, if it's expressed as a probability, compared with the amount that they withdraw. Clearly, we all would like to have a larger income or a larger retirement cash flow to work with, a better quality of life, hopefully. But we all understand that if you withdraw more, of course, the likelihood that your portfolio would last over the 20 or 30-year horizon of your retirement goes down. So it's that comparison that we'd like to better understand generally. How much can I withdraw and still keep the probability of my portfolio surviving very high? And that's exactly the kinds of prototype tools that we have built post-user conference. I alluded to this a bit in the presentation at the user conference, and we have subsequently created some simple models that do this kind of work. I'm showing you a partial screen from one of those models. This is a Monte Carlo-based model, fancy word for just meaning that it runs many thousands of interest rate paths given a particular set of assumptions, and then shows you what the probabilistic outcome will be. So on the left-hand side, you can see, I won't go through these in detail, but you can see a variety of inputs where we tell the model things like how much is in our investment portfolio, and what kind of reverse mortgage are we going to do, what amounts, what interest rate, those kinds of things. What kind of home property value is it based upon? And then the checkboxes at the bottom provide some opportunities to run a variety of different scenarios so we can compare different scenarios and understand the effect of each. The graph you see shows the probability of survival of the portfolio, that we don't use it all up over various amounts of money being withdrawn every month. So let's take a look at two specific different scenarios using this Monte Carlo simulation model and see what it can tell us. So first, the red curve represents a simple investment portfolio of $800,000. We picked $800,000 for this example because that's the median portfolio size of people in the United States that are working directly with a financial planner. So we can see that with different withdrawal amounts, in the first column, a 4% annual withdrawal amount, which corresponds to $2,750 a month, the portfolio with many thousands of future interest rate paths has a very high probability of surviving, in this particular case, surviving 25 years. Almost 100% probability, about 98%. If we increase the amount that's withdrawn, no other change, we just take a larger percentage, an extra percent, 5%, which corresponds to a little, right near $3,500-ish a month. Then we see that this portfolio, this investment portfolio, the probability of surviving, given all the different interest rate paths, drops down to a bit above 80%, about 84%. Similarly, if we go up to 6%, it drops again, and so forth. And eventually, if we get up to around 8-9%, we're taking a fair chunk of money out now, $5,000 to $6,000 a month. The likelihood that this portfolio will live drops to essentially zero. It's not going to make it for 25 years. So if we look specifically at this 6% number, this $4,125 a month withdrawal rate, little less than half the probability of survival of the portfolio over 25 years. Now, for most folks, unless you're very comfortable with very high risk, that's pretty low. I wouldn't want to be enjoying my 25-year retirement with a less than 50% chance that my portfolio was going to make it and I was going to be able to live off of it for 25 years. So let's contrast that, though, with the scenario very similar to the one I just outlined for you with Silly Sally and Brilliant Betty a few minutes ago. All we've done is taken that same investment portfolio, and as we've done these thousands of future interest rate paths, anytime we had a year of negative returns predicted, on that year, we used the line of credit of a HECM instead of withdrawing from the portfolio. And that gives us the blue line. And as you can see, the probability of survival with that strategy goes up dramatically. In this particular case, at that 6% withdrawal rate, it jumps from 47% to 93.7%. Again, even if you're a risk-averse person, an almost 94% probability that portfolio will live over 25 years, that's pretty doggone good. I think I would be comfortable with that. So what this says is, by using this HECM strategy, I can now withdraw 2% more every month. Really, that's increasing my withdrawals quite dramatically, 50% more withdrawal per month, and still have a 94% chance that my portfolio will last over my 25-year planning horizon. That's $1,375 more a month, or $330,000 over these 25 years. That's a nice enhancement to your portfolio for somebody who came into the game maybe thinking they had a well-funded portfolio that they did not need to worry about. They didn't need to worry, but you've made their life dramatically better with a much nicer opportunity to enjoy their retirement. So this kind of improval, this strategies of the type that I'm illustrating here in just one simple example, can be used a variety of ways. I just tried to use it to show a retiree potentially how they could take more money over the same time horizon and increase the survivability of their portfolio with that larger withdrawal. Clearly, there's fundamentally three ways that a retiree could choose to use this advantage, financially speaking. They could withdraw more so that they can live better. But if they're happy with their withdrawal rate, they could increase the survivability of their portfolio. They could protect their portfolio better and either increase the probability that it'll last or increase the horizon, the length of time that it's going to last, to decrease the odds that they'll outlive their portfolio. A third way to use it would be to put all of the improvement exclusively into the value of the portfolio so that it's larger at the time that it gets passed down to whoever the heirs may be, simply increasing the estate to increase the legacy that they hand off to their recipients. Fundamentally, it comes down to asking the right question. Each borrower's desires and needs are going to be different. Each one comes to the game with a different portfolio, with a different risk tolerance. So again, we think that it's going to be particularly critical to use a set of financial modeling tools like the kinds that I just showed you graphs from, so that you can interact with each borrower uniquely and help show them how you can make their particular desires come true, or at least come closer to being true. Using these kind of tools and becoming familiar with them, I think, is going to be substantially more fundamental to selling HECMs with respect to borrowers in the near future. At the very least, becoming more familiar with these kinds of strategies will make you more conversant with setting up those incredibly necessary relationships with financial planners who can and should be doing this in even more sophisticated ways. And as long as you as a loan officer and a lender are conversant in these techniques, you're going to be a much more attractive relationship partner with a given financial planner. So you'll see from us these kinds of prototypes. We're going to continue this work. You're going to see them in a commercial sense, ultimately, in our relatively new RVSA product, the Sales Accelerator product. It already has contact management in it. Loan creation status and update has been partially released just last week, with another set of features coming in about 2 weeks. Scenario Builder and the modeling of the type I've just talked about are in prototype stages right now, will eventually appear in this product as well. If you're interested in playing it all with RVSA, I have the URL up there. But even more importantly, I wanted to point you to the support portal at ReverseVision. We have a community, a discussion group there for the RVSA product, but in particular, it's an area that I hope we can continue to increase conversations. We're looking for your ideas and feedback. Where should we take these modeling ideas? What are the scenarios that you're seeing with your own customers that we particularly need to be looking at and thinking about? Would this stuff be of use to you? Educational materials, sales materials, and ultimately these kind of modeling tools. And if so, for what and how might you use them? We're very anxious to interactively engage with everybody in our user community to understand better how we can help in these particular areas. I encourage your questions, not only now, if you want to type them in, but undoubtedly later, either via the support portal, as I just described, in the communities there, or certainly anytime via email. Thank you very much for your time today. I hope it was an idea or two that was useful to you.
Thank you, John. We have a few questions coming up. I'm waiting for them to pop up, and Kelly will be asking those momentarily. To reiterate what John said, please do be interactive. Most of you know how to find me. Go to the support portal. We do value your feedback.
Okay, thanks, John and Wendy. We do have a couple questions here. We did have one comment that was saying excellent modeling tools, so good job, John, in showing how that's working. We do have one. Are there other financial selling tools that you'll be working on different products for?
Yeah, definitely. The example that I had time to go through today was largely this notion of sequence returns risk, but you can imagine with the kind of Monte Carlo simulation model a wide variety of other capabilities. Let me just list a couple of ideas in particular. A common use for reverse, as you all are, I'm sure, more familiar with than I am, is delaying things like Social Security. So we think that looking at the effects of a HECM together with Social Security, timing is going to be an interesting model opportunity. Another one is the understanding, modeling to be able to illustrate for a borrower the effect of the growth of a line of credit over time relative to their home value and how that plays out under a variety of scenarios. Ultimately, we want to deliver a variety of models of this type, all integrated together. So in the most sophisticated form, you could combine a variety of these issues into one analysis for a customer and show them the overall effect in a combined world of the change in their retirement potential.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Kelly,
I think I think on the heels of that, are there going to be classes or any kind of training sessions on these approaches?
Good question. Yes. So where we are right now is with the modeling that we're doing in a proof of concept and sort of prototype stage, we're working together with a small group of individuals in a sort of early prototyping environment. And so in that environment, we've been doing some training already. And that training, as we get feedback from folks and we make it better, will ultimately be delivered a variety of ways. Some of it we hope to make into materials that we make freely available via the support portal. Some of it will be via webinar sessions that our support staff via their normal training can deliver and will be delivering. I hope some pieces will ultimately migrate into ReverseVision University so that they're on-demand training as well. And last but certainly not least, our professional services folks, when they're on site, can also deliver more in-depth and more customized training to the needs of individuals. So a lot of different channels we hope to be able to deliver this kind of knowledge.
All right. Thank you, John. Looking at the clock, we have actually gone over by a couple of minutes, but I do hope everyone found this to be informative. Again, please fill out the survey that will be sent to you right after this webinar, and thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Have a great day.